Hello and welcome to another podcast from the Freedom Association. I'm Andrew Allison. Joining me today is Lee Anderson, who is the Conservative MP for Ashfield. Lee was a miner for 10 years and was, until recently, a lifelong Labour member. He was a Labour councillor in Ashfield. He used to work for Gloria de Piero, his predecessor as the Member of Parliament for Ashfield, but he defected to the Conservatives in 2018. He was elected as a Conservative councillor in nearby Mansfield in 2019. And then, probably much to his surprise, just a few months later, he was selected as the Conservative candidate for his hometown in Ashfield and was elected as the MP in December 2019. Well, thank you very much for joining me, Lee.
You're welcome, Andrew. I'm really chuffed to be here.
Thank you. I mean, it's incredible, isn't it, that you were a Labour man all those years, and yeah, like many people. I mean, I went on a similar journey, but quite a lot of years ago. But like many people who were lifelong Labour supporters have now moved across to the Conservatives. What does it say about Labour, really?
Well, it says a lot of things, and it's not just happened overnight. I don't think, Andrew. It's been a bit of a journey. It's been a long journey for me. You know, that realisation from being a young Labour Party member at age 16 in 1983 to actually working for a Labour MP in 2010. 2012, and then up till 2018, I was very active in the Labour Party, but I saw things that didn't resonate with me, didn't resonate with the people of Ashfield. You know, we would go to meetings and we'd talk about things like Palestine and the problems over there, where I wanted to talk about unemployment and deprivation and poverty in my hometown, and it was of no interest to local Labour members. It was absolute madness. And I thought, my goodness, you know, what am I doing in this party that doesn't speak up for the local area, has got no real sort of, you know, connection with the local area. They're all pretty well off, pretty liberal, you know, the cosmopolitan set. I thought, this is not right. So I always remember at one meeting, one of the Labour councillors said to me, "Have you read the works of Karl Marx?" And I said, "No, I've not." And they said, they said, "Well, why don't you go and join the Tory party?" I thought, you know what, that's a great idea. So I did. I went and joined the Tory party and took their advice, and thankfully, I'm now their Member of Parliament. So when I see them in the street, I say thank you for that advice you gave me. That's a great career change for me. I now get to represent the masses of Ashfield and speak in a way that they speak. And no longer will we have somebody parachuted in from an area, you know, that's got nothing in common with Ashfield. I can actually speak on behalf of Ashfield residents because I went to school here, I was born here, I've been in the hospitals here, I've worked here, and I've raised my family here. So I think I'm a voice. And the more I do this job and the more I speak to people, the more I realise that, you know, I've done the right thing. And people thank me in the street for speaking up because I am quite outspoken. And for the first time ever in this seat, people can listen to the debates and the questions in Parliament and actually have someone that speaks like them and ask the same questions that they want to be asked.
It was a remarkable result in 2019. I mean, there were some seats that I expected to fall to the Conservatives and Labour to lose, but the others that genuinely shocked me. I mean, Bolsover genuinely shocked me. Dennis Skinner had been there since 1970. I mean, that was incredible. And then there were places like Blythe Valley, up in Northumberland, and a few others. Sedgefield, Tony Blair's old seat. I mean, that was quite a shock. So I think it goes to show the strength of feeling there from people who have voted Labour all their lives, who felt that the Labour Party had deserted them. It wasn't a party of the working class anymore, was it? As you said, it was a party of looking at the works of Karl Marx. It was a party that's sort of more interested in sort of peripheral issues for most people, such as, you know, transgender toilets and things like that. And I remember in an interview that I did with a Labour man, actually, it was Brendan Chilton, who ran Labour Leave during the Brexit campaign. I said to him, and this was just before Keir Starmer was announced as the leader of the Labour Party, that if Labour picks another sort of London metropolitan type leader, it doesn't stand a chance in the North and the Midlands. And I think I've been proved right, because Keir Starmer doesn't have any cut through, does he?
Well, I think you're right, Andrew. I mean, the problem the Labour Party's got at the moment, Keir Starmer is actually the best person they've got to be the leader of the Labour Party, who's currently an MP, when I say. He
Yeah.
cuts no ice. He cuts no ice in places like Ashfield and Mansfield and Bolsover. When you speak to the normal working class bread and butter voters of the Labour Party, and you mention Sakir, does that sound like a Labour Party leader? It doesn't, and he's got a real problem now. He's got to pick a side. Now they call him Captain Hindsight in Parliament. That's his nickname. But he has to pick. He does have to pick a side now. Does he? Does he go to the centre and appease, the right of his party, or does he pander to the left? And there's a lot of them in Parliament at the moment. They make up a good chunk of his own MPs. I think he's in a no-win situation. Whatever he does, he's damned if he does, and he's damned if he don't. But harping back to the Red Wall seats, simple really. I knew Bolsover we was going to win Bolsover. I knew we would win Blythe Valley. I did the maths. I looked at the European referendum in 2016. Looked at the leave areas. It's really easy. Look at the leave area in the north, in the Midlands, and we're going to win them seats. It's as simple as that.
Well, I looked at the data as well, and I'm normally pretty good at this, I have to admit, even though I say so myself. But I just couldn't quite believe that would happen. It seems such a big jump. But there you go. That just proves,
Yeah.
that under the first past the post system, anything can really happen. I mean, you can affect real change under first past the post that you can't under proportional representation.
Yeah.
I knew my friend Deanna Davison would win in Bishop Auckland. She was, when she was looking at that seat, she contacted me and she said, "Well, you were brought up there." I said, "Well, yeah." I said, "I haven't lived there for nearly 20 years, but my mother's still there. I've still got family there." And she said, "Well, would you talk me through the constituency?" Which I did. So that's my part in her electoral triumph. But what she actually did, and I'm sure it's what you do, and it's what all other good MPs do, is you look at those local issues that you've mentioned and you focus in on them. So for example, after Labour won the 1997 general election, it promised a brand new hospital for Bishop Auckland. Sure enough, if I remember rightly, the foundation stone was laid by Tony Blair that built a new hospital. It opened. And then within a few years, it was downgraded. Then it lost its A&E facility. And people were rightly annoyed by that. And Deanna comes in and says, "Well, I'm going to fight for you here. Let's get this A&E reopened again. Let's turn this back into a proper hospital." And that is what good, well, occasionally with a candidate, but now that's what a good MP actually does.
Yeah.
Fights for the constituents. And I think, a few of them, I mean, she replaced Helen Goodman, who was absolutely simply awful. I mean, I don't know what your relationship was like with Gloria. It must have been a pretty decent one for a lot of years.
Yeah.
But I can think of a lot of MPs who basically just took their constituents for granted.
Well, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I look at when I worked for Gloria, I looked at offices like David Miliband's office, which I used to contact on a few occasions, and he never went there. I think he had something like a 1% contact rate with his constituents. That's awful. I'll be out today after this call. I'm going out door knocking and campaigning, ready for the council elections. I think what Labour's done, they've took these northern seats for granted. You'll go into an area like Durham or the northeast, and you'll hear all these strange northern accents from the locals, but then you've got a Labour MP who speaks like somebody from London, a posh part of London. And that just shows you. And I always say that, and both parties or three parties have been guilty of this, but not so much now us. If you can't find somebody in your own constituency that can represent your party at Parliament, then there's something wrong with your selection process, because there are talented people in every single constituency in this country who have got a strong voice, know their people, and can do a good job in Parliament. And I think political parties are switching on to this now. I think the Tory party definitely has. We've got accents in Parliament that you would never have heard before from a Conservative party. I see that my Northwest colleagues, my Midlands, my Derbyshire, my Notts, my Northeast, my Humberside, Hull. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant when we sit around the table with the Prime Minister and you hear all these different voices. So Labour could learn a lot from that.
If you care about free speech and abhor cancel culture, then why not join the Freedom Association? Just go into our website, tfa.net. At the top of the screen, click on the Join button. £30 ordinary membership, £20 for seniors, and the bargain price of just a £5 for students. moving the conversation on to sort of more freedom-related issues, but I still think what we've discussed is a good background to it all, because you've touched on this, that most people in your constituency, I would say most working class people right across the country, basically take pride in their country. They take pride in the flag. We've had all these sort of issues. They don't like their country talked down. And yet, when we've seen a case recently at Batley Grammar School with a religious studies teacher who showed pupils in context, by what I can gather, the front cover of the Charlie Hebdo magazine back from 2012, which had a caricature of Muhammad on it. He warned them that they may find it offensive, they could look away if necessary. But who should have been running to this man's defence? It should have been his local MP. Local MP, Labour MP, hasn't done so. His headmaster should have defended the right to academic freedom. He threw him under a bus. His trade unions should have been defending him. I think he's a member of the National Education Union. They should have been defending them, and they haven't. And in the end, the people who are defending him are those of us who are more right of centre. So there is a real divide when it comes to freedom of speech in this country. There are some significant voices on the left, traditional civil liberties voices on the left, but they're getting very few and far between now. And the Labour Party and a lot on the left seem to have just gone to looking for minority sports to defend, rather than defending what the majority of British people actually want defending, which is their country, which is their free speech.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Andrew, 100%. I mean, I think the Labour Party and that side of politics, they're constantly looking for minority groups and then highlighting the issues in order to agitate and cause problems. Now, we should all be defended. Our rights to free speech should be defended, but that means everybody. You can't just pick certain groups in society like the Labour, the unions, and the left do, and highlight problems. It has to be everybody, and we have to have balance. And it's unfortunate this school teacher, he's been doing his job, and he's done it in a way that he thought best. And from what I understand, he's got an unblemished record as well. And the certain parts of society have jumped on his back straight away. He's horrified. He's in hiding. His union have not defended him. His headmaster, like you say, have thrown him under a bus. And this sends out completely the wrong message to not just school teachers, to anybody in this country who are now going to be thinking twice about what they say. And it shouldn't be like that. We have a right to free speech. We have a right to even to offend people because what might offend you might not offend me. And we cannot live in a country where we're constantly, minding our lip, thinking about what we can and can't say. That's not healthy. It's not healthy for debate. You can't think to yourself, "Oh, I want to upset somebody now, I better keep quiet." No, you should be able to speak your mind. As long as you're not inciting hatred and violence and problems like that, it's worrying times. And we must kick back on this. We must fight back. And we must make sure that everybody's got a voice, regardless of what group you're in. And I hate this groupings, what the left do. They talk about BAME and LBGT. I'm sick to death of hearing about these people in these little groups. No, we're all human beings. Most of us in this island are British. We've got some immigrants, but they live a British way of life. We're all people trying to live a decent life on this great island of ours, and we should get on and stop separating into these little groups, which only stokes more division.
Well, I don't know if you've seen the news, but News UK have now banning the use of the term BAME. Now, I don't know the ins and outs of it, but they're trying to say you've got to be more specific. This person, is a Bangladeshi Asian origin, or this person is from, an African, Black African origin. But rather than and I sort of agree with it in some ways, because when you just say BAME, you just lump everybody all together. Yeah. As if they all think the same and all feel the same, which is total nonsense, really, isn't it?
It's absolute rubbish. I mean, why are we separating people into groups based on their colour, their sexuality, their race, their religion? Just stop it. It's absolute nonsense. Most people, 99% of people in this country couldn't give a monkey's really about what colour you are, what job you do, what sexuality you are. But it's certain parts of the media it's certain politicians and certain political parties that make a big deal of it. Whereas, quite frankly, most everyday people that you meet in the street or at work or wherever, they don't give a toss about it. You know, we're humans, we're friends, we're family, we're workmates. Just get on with life and stop bickering, arguing about what the colour of your skin is, what sexuality you are, you know, what school you've been to. We're not interested. We are not interested. Stop stoking that division.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. As you, well, hardly shocks you, I think, to hear that. But there was a survey done. I read it at the beginning of the year, and it backs up what you've already said. That a majority of people in the UK feel that they're less free now to speak their minds than they were 5 years ago, even just 5 years ago. That they feel that there's certain things that they cannot say, or they're frightened that if they say certain things, they're going to get the police knocking on their door. And that is a very sorry state of affairs. So I completely agree with you. You know, we've got to really start fighting back and fighting back hard. Otherwise, our country is going to change into something that we just do not recognize. And I think that process has already started. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it has. I mean, I'm part of a group at work, 50 Tory MPs and a few Lords, called the Common Sense Group, and we're tackling issues just like this. You know, the right to the freedom of speech, the right to vent your anger in public, if you like. Now, I think a big problem here, Andrew, is social media. I've come off of Twitter because I think it's just so. But I do use Facebook quite a bit to get my message across. But what you see happening now is you see people, you know, before I post anything, I'm thinking to myself, how many times is this post going to be screenshotted before I can delete it? And it's probably about 1,000 times. So people are constantly waiting to screenshot your next comment, and then it's off to your political party to complain, or to the police, or it's shared a million times. And we're sort of living in a snitch society, where people are just snitching on each other all the time for a comment they may have made, for a Facebook post or a tweet or whatever. And I find that deeply upsets me, and I've had it on my page where I've had troll accounts, fake accounts, put a really offensive message on my Facebook, you know, really offensive, sometimes racist, sometimes sexist comment on my Facebook, and then I've been reported for allowing that comment on. I think, my goodness, I didn't even know, you know, I get 100,000 hits a week, and so that's what they do. They try and set you up and stitch you up. So I'm constantly having to try to police my Facebook page, which I shouldn't have to, just because people want to put nasty comments to try and get me in trouble, to cause problems for me. And that's the world we live in. That's the world we live in, where, you know, we live in an instant news world where you can say something and somebody as far away as Australia can see your comments pretty much straight away. So we have to be, especially as politicians, have to be really, really careful what we put out there on social media. Sometimes you can't always put your true feelings on, because it just gets translated in a completely different way. You know, we all say the wrong things.
Yeah, but I mean, that's sorry, Lee. There's the slight delay on that. I thought you finished there. Sorry, but this is the danger, isn't it? Because you're frightened. Well, not frightened maybe, but just concerned that you can't really fully speak your mind and say what you actually think and represent your constituents like that. The democracy loses out because. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
It does lose out because you lose some of that sincerity. When you're constantly censoring yourself, really, you're thinking to yourself, what can I say and what can't I say? When really it shouldn't be like that, because whatever you put on social media or whatever you say in the press or through the media, your words will always be twisted to fit their narrative, if you like. And you know, there's good and bad in this. I mean, the good news is that most people in the centre, if you like, most normal people actually get it. They can see what's going off. But the bad part of it is it creates that division between, you know, the left and right of politics. And when at a time when we should be coming together, post Brexit, post COVID, and all this sort of stuff, when we should be pulling the country together, you know, you've got the social media, you've got your trolls on both sides of the argument, keeps dragging us apart. And that's sad to see. It's like there's two sections of society constantly want to battle. They constantly want to war with each other. Nobody wins in a war like that. And I think, you know, I'll go back to the Labour Party. I think this is why they're in such a big hole at the moment, because the left of the party will not let the right, Sir Keir, and his colleagues come to the centre. They won't allow that to happen. Meanwhile, we're pretty much to the centre, I think, a little bit right on the economy and stuff like that. Sometimes we're a little bit left on social things now, actually, which people are seeing that. You know, people that voted Conservative for the first time in 2019 are thinking, hold on a minute, you're not nasty Tories, are you really? You're just one of us. You just want what's best for your community. So the more they see that, the more Labour's got a big problem. And if we had a general election tomorrow, I think we'd get an 100 seat majority. I'm convinced of it.
You'd certainly win with a sizable majority. I've got no doubt about that. I mean, Keir Starmer, I don't believe wants all these street names to be changed around the country and for statues to come down. He doesn't strike me as that sort of a bloke, but he's certainly getting a lot of pressure from the left of the Labour Party to do that. I picked up a story on the news this morning from Australia, where all the boys in a class had to stand up and apologise for the sins of all men treating women badly. I mean, it's incredible. I've got a horrible thing. It's coming to a school near us. It wouldn't surprise me. If you want to go back far enough, just about everybody held racist views.
Yeah.
I mean that was what people thought at the time. You can't judge historical figures by the standards that we have today. You know, my father was a Salvation Army officer back in the 1950s. He then became a Methodist local preacher, and he says it says in the Bible that it's a sin to be a homosexual, and therefore that is completely wrong. I used to argue with him. We used to have some spirited arguments actually before he died. But you know, but things change and things move on. If he'd expressed those views now, he could have actually found the police knocking on his door, which is totally unacceptable. And you have to accept in a free society there will be people who have differing views to you, and they're deeply held views. It could be deeply held for religious reasons. I mean, for example, I don't see Islam as an example, sort of embracing homosexuality in any shape or form. Yet nobody really criticizes them, but you get a fundamentalist Christian preacher preaching against the sins of homosexuality. I can guarantee the police will stop them. So there's a lot of double standards in all of this as well.
Yeah, there is double standards, Andrew. And I just go back to what you were saying about your dad in the 50s. You know, we are of our time. All of us are, in probably 100 years' time when we're dead and gone, there will be people looking back to what we've said on this podcast and thinking that's outrageous. Just like we look at things that were said in the 30s and 40s and thinking, my goodness, that's outrageous. So things develop, but it's important that we all develop together. You can't have one section of society having it all their own way, or one religion or whatever. We've all got to move forward. This planet we live on is a wonderful place. And we've got a chance to come together and live a great life. Most of us have. Unfortunately, in some countries that doesn't happen. But I get a little bit annoyed that in this country we live in a great country where we have got freedoms, regardless of what's happening with COVID and that. We've got massive freedoms. We're living in a safe country. We feel safe walking our streets. We've got a political system where every 5 years you can sack the prime minister. We've got a lot in this country, a lot to be proud of. But like you say. Some of the language that we use now compared to, I go back to the 70s, some of the programs that used to be on TV, outrageous language, but I still
I'm a little bit younger than you, Lee, so I remember exactly the same programs.
Yeah, I mean, I watch, I look at programs now like Rising Damp and some of the Carry On films and It Ain't Half Hot Mum, and I watch them now and I laugh my head off, but I know that they wouldn't be allowed to be made in this day and age. They would be seen as racist, as sexist, as misogynist. But it's of its time, and it's sort of in our DNA. We've been brought up on it, and we've been brought up and been conditioned and to accept that, and to know it's okay to laugh at it. But in a 20 years' time, those programs won't be allowed on the TV. I know they won't, because it'll be deemed racist, sexist, misogynist, and whatever. So, like I say, of their time.
You mentioned Rising Damp, but of course, I mean, from my memory, I can't remember the black character's name in the program, but he was far more intelligent than the bigoted.
Yeah, well, that was the old
and he always got the upper hand on him, didn't he?
Well, that was the irony. That was brilliant writing. The irony was that Rigsby treated this Phil as an ignorant black man, and really, it was really, really clever. and every single episode he got one over on Rigsby, and that was the comedy for me. That was revealing Rigsby's racism and how stupid he was to be a racist, bigoted old man. Because actually, this chap who had come into his life was far more intelligent, much cleverer, and destined for much greater things. So that was the real comedy for me.
Yeah, it was. It was the same with Warren Mitchell and Alf Garner.
Yeah.
I remember watching an interview with Warren Mitchell. He said he'd be walking down the streets and someone was saying, "Good on you, Alf, for saying that. Let's kick the blacks out." And he just looked at them and said, "Do you not realise what I'm doing is basically taking the piss out of you?
Yes,
that's
exactly.
That's what I'm doing. You not realise that?"
Yeah, I know. That is hilarious itself. That is.
Yeah, no, it is very much. You mentioned about COVID. We're still a free society. Well, yes, I mean, we're gradually opening up. I've got my reservations on the speed of all of this. I've certainly got my reservations on the 6-month extension of the Coronavirus Act, which I noticed that you, by proxy, voted in favor.
Yes, I did. But and I can tell you why.
Yeah, actually, yes. Tell me why before I move on to something else.
So, I mean, I'm one of these, crack on, get on with it sort of guy. But I'm from the place I represent, and I know lots of families who's lost loved ones. So if I was not in Parliament now, I'd be screaming at the screen saying, "Get on with it." But when I get people contacting me saying my husband's died or my cousin's died and blah blah blah, it makes you think twice. It does, because when you go into that voting booth, or if you're voting by proxy, you've got to look them people in the eye when you come back to Ashfield, when you go in the shops, when you're walking around town, and my hospital, I've got a massive hospital in my patch, and every time I've voted, I've always spoke to the chief exec and say, "What's it like? What's it like?" And spoke to the chief nurse or staff there. I volunteer at the vaccination centre 3 times a week, so I see it firsthand. So I'm not coming at it from an ideological point of view, really. I'm coming at it from a personal view of the people I work with at the vaccine centre who told me that we're doing the right thing. The NHS staff told me the right thing. And before every vote, I've emailed out to 4,000 constituents and asked them their opinions. And every time it's been 70% plus, back the government. And that's a bit of a coward's way out as an MP. I admit that, because I've sort of said to myself, I want to ask my constituents and let them decide which way I vote. And I've told my whips I won't be whipped on it. I will go with what my constituents think. And each time they back government. And in this instance, the Coronavirus Act, I will continue to ask my residents, my hospital and the vaccine centre, which is the best thing to do. And that's what I've done.
Well, we're all hoping that by June, the vast majority of restrictions will not be in place at all. I mean, that's what the government's roadmap says. So that's good. So we can only hope that the Coronavirus Act will be taken off the statute book in September. But the reason why I mentioned that is because we're all about snitching and things like that.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of snitching going on during COVID. Now, don't get me wrong. If I heard loud music a few months ago, if I heard loud music from a house and there was about 30 cars parked outside and there was people milling in and out and all the rest of it, I think I'd have been tempted to call the police. I'm sure somebody would have called the police to say an illegal activity is going on. But we've had so many cases, haven't we? I mean, the one of the pensioner who was outside her home with a socially distanced cup of tea with her fellow elderly neighbours. And if you remember that one, it's from about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
They were doing absolutely nothing wrong. In fact, they're all being vaccinated, and they were in the great outdoors. And yet a neighbour thought it was a good idea to call the police. So here's this lady settling down for the evening. She gets a knock on the door from the police, questioning her about her activities during the day. Now that isn't a Britain that I certainly recognise. It's not a country that I recognise. And I just wonder if, as the government has encouraged people, well, contact the police if you think someone's breaking the law, if that really is going to have a detrimental effect on freedom as we go forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate that my police would never do something like that in Ashfield. I know they wouldn't, because I spend a lot of time with them. But it's interesting, that is, some old lady having a cup of tea gets a thick black leather glove banging on the door at all hours. Yet we have riots in Bristol. We have riots in London. We have all these mass demonstrations. When really, I think police should be taking a firmer hand. If you're gonna be working to the letter of the law, let's sort these people out that's causing mayhem and destruction and committing acts of violence and arson on these demonstrations, which actually are supposed to protect our freedoms, if you like, protect free speech, protect peaceful protest. And I've got nothing wrong with peaceful protests. You know, when I go to Parliament, I love seeing all these people with the banners and the sandwich boards and the kazoos and making all these weird noises and shouting and screaming. I think that's brilliant. I think, yeah, I'm going into Parliament. I get my chance to have my say, and all these people outside, I get their chance to have their say. That's wonderful. But, you know, there's a fine line between demonstrating and trying to influence change, than, you know, being an agitator, a trouble causer, a revolutionary, if you like, which some of these people are. And then you see the other side, like the old lady having a cup of tea. You know, she's been vaccinated. I'm thinking, you know what, policeman, why are you knocking on that door? And if that were in my patch, I'd be having a conversation with the chief constable, saying, you know what, if you've got all these resources to waste money on knocking on an old lady's door who's had a cup of tea, then don't come knocking on my door and asking for more money.
Yes, and it has been sort of force by force, hasn't it? You know, Nottinghamshire police is saying have been very good. You go up the road from you to Derbyshire. I mean, right at the beginning, there were drones out telling people they couldn't walk their dogs, even though there's no one about 2 miles away from them. There were those two friends who had cups of tea, didn't they? Or cups of coffee.
Yeah.
And going out for a walk. They're both driven there in separate cars. They were both 2 meters apart. And the police were trying to say you're having a picnic because you've got a couple of cups of coffee in your hand. But I mean, fortunately, I mean, where I am, it's Humberside Police, and I haven't heard of anything that's been stupid.
Oh, well, that's it, Andrew. You only hear about these bad instances, don't you, where they've done something really, really silly, and the press do blow it up. We don't hear about the 99.9% of police forces who are actually doing okay. And I mean, I go back to the vaccine centre that I work at. I do 3 shifts a week, and when I'm there, there's me, NHS staff, there's volunteers, there's policemen, and there's firemen, all mucking in together to get people through as quickly and safely as possible. So, you know, it is a national effort, and I wouldn't tar all the police with the same brush. I just think we've got sometimes in positions of power in police force, and that may be chief constables or crime commissioners, a bit too liberal in some areas, and a bit too militant in other areas. And that, you know, that like I say, that instance where they've you know, going to an old lady's door who's had a cup of tea is just absolutely ridiculous. I would love to know the mentality of the senior officer that instigated that. Really would.
Yeah, no,
probably was a disgruntled ex-traffic warden in a previous life.
Well, when they started to announce things like COVID marshals, I was thinking to myself, there's only going to be a certain type of person who actually wants to do that job. I certainly wouldn't want to do it.
There is, and we laugh, and you know, and you know, traffic wardens and professionals like that are ridiculed very often. But I tell you what, I do take my hat off to them. Literally, it takes a strong character to be able to put up with that level of abuse on a daily basis and keep going out and doing your public service. And like, again, traffic wardens, you know, they're good, there's bad, indifferent. My wife got a ticket yesterday, and my wife suffers from cystic fibrosis. She's had a double lung transplant, and she looks well, although she looks well on the outside, not well on the inside. And she got a ticket from the machine. She put a blue disabled badge in the front. But what she forgot to do, and she did this in front of the traffic warden, and she said to the traffic warden, she said, I put it here just above. She goes, yeah, that's fine. What she forgot to do, because the clock in her car had not been forward, I think, on Sunday. So she put the wrong time on a blue badge, put the sticker in, went to the shop. She was there 3 or 4 minutes, come back, she got a ticket. Now that traffic warden had seen her, and I just thought, well, there's, you know, that's, she probably looked at my wife and think there's nothing wrong with you. Because you look okay, but there's no need for that. So yeah, I mean,
you can't make those judgments. You can't make those judgments, because you have someone who looks very well like your wife, but basically, if they walk 100 yards down the road, they completely out of breath.
Right, yeah.
And you can't make those assumptions. But that's a horrible thing. I'm assuming you're appealing that one, Lee.
Yes, I'm appealing that, and I think I might go on, you know, claim some sort of disability discrimination on that as well, because I don't like playing that card. But that traffic warden has made an assumption. I think she's made an assumption that my wife, there's nothing wrong with her, and she's probably scammed a blue badge or borrowed it from somebody or whatever. I mean, but she actually saw her get the ticket out of the machine and put it in. I mean, it's nonsense.
Looking to the future, and so before we wrap this interview up, just what do you think the state of freedom is at the moment? How do you think it's going to be in a few years' time? I mean, Boris has been, pretty libertarian. I mean, he hasn't been particularly libertarian over COVID,
No,
but
no.
but generally he's written lots of articles, particularly the
Yeah.
Telegraph, and when he was editor of the Spectator, and has been very libertarian. He certainly believes in free speech. Do you think we'll be in a better position, say, well, not even 5 years' time, say about 3 years' time at the next general election than we are now?
Yeah, yeah, I think we will. I think the important thing for us in the Conservative Party and especially the Common Sense Group, which I'm a part of, is we've got to continue the war on woke. We've got to continue fighting the culture war. We've got to continue fighting, for free speech and speaking out. And we've got to make sure that we take the fight to the left. Especially with things like renaming streets, pulling down statues, removing our flags from things. And I say to my colleagues, if we win the culture war, we win the next election.
Yeah, yes, I think you're probably right on that one. And I'm pleased you mentioned cancel culture, because I was leaving that really to the end, because it strikes me that if you're very powerful, you can get away with it. So, for example, and this isn't a criticism of her, by the way, J.K. Rowling, she's had enormous grief on social media.
Yeah.
You spoke earlier about the sewer of social media, Twitter, really,
Yeah.
and she's had so much abuse. But there were even people trying to burn her books. I mean, I found it hilarious in some ways, because it's such a small minority sport, that, But there are some people advocating that. But she's, of course, big enough, rich enough, powerful enough, takes it on the chin, and then just moves on to the next thing. But then you've got people like I can't think of his name now, but he was the executive director of the Society of Editors, who basically said after that Harry and Meghan interview that he didn't believe that the British press was racist. Now, any fair-minded person would say, well, that guy's doing his job, isn't he? He's defending his industry. That's exactly what he should be doing. But he wasn't really as powerful enough. So he got cancelled. He just got forced out of his job, kicked out of his job. And you get plenty of other people at much lower levels where that happens. Just a casual throwaway remark, and it's as if that person is damned for the rest of their lives. Now, that is something that we really have to work on, because if someone has said something that is horribly racist, then fair enough, call them out on it. I've got no problem with that. But if someone just happens to make a bit of a casual sort of joke, a mother-in-law joke or something like that, then all of these things are going to be put into context.
Yeah, I mean, you touch on an important issue, Andrew. Equality is really important to me. Now, just a few years ago, when I was still in the Labour Party, I got in a spot of hot water. There was an equality conference. I think it was at the Labour conference. I think it was like an equality conference, but I wasn't allowed to go because I was a white male. So I sort of kicked off a little bit. I thought, well, surely if you have an event on equality, and everybody should be allowed to go. You shouldn't be in one of these pockets or these sections of society to get an invite. Don't agree with that. And they said to me, you don't know what it's like to be a person like this. I said, I know I don't. I know I don't know what it's like to be a black person, a woman, somebody of different sexuality. I know all these things. That's why people like me should be going to these events, to listen to people like you. Because if we don't, we're never going to know where the problem lies. And there are problems, with people like me. That we may have some prejudices or whatever in the back of our head. And, I'm prepared to have a discussion with anybody. But you don't have that discussion by not talking to you and bringing you inside the tent. So it's absolute nonsense.
Yeah, it's all very divisive. It just compartmentalizes the debate, doesn't it? You've got everybody in their little boxes and let them fight against each other, because that's the best thing, rather than just having one big debate. I mean, in London later this year, we're hoping it's going to be September or October. It should have been June last year, but you can understand the reason why we didn't have a conference in June last year. But September, October, King's College London, and we're looking at a platform for the no platformed type of conference, a big free speech conference, which you're more than welcome to because we feel that it's vitally important that we just keep pushing this debate forward. Toby Young and the Free Speech Union are going to help us, and lots of other campaigners will be as well, free speech campaigners. So I'm hoping that in 3 years' time it'll be better. It certainly will not be for the want of trying. On behalf of people like me in the Freedom Association. So I really do hope that things will be much better. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time because you said you've got to go door knocking, and
Yes,
today's the hottest day of the year so far, isn't it? So
yeah.
it's a good time to do it. But I really hope, because this is the first time we've actually met face to face, and it's all virtual. So I'm hoping that at some point in the summer we may be able to meet up face to face and have a pint and chew the fat in Westminster.
Yes, it will be a vegan pint as well for me.
A what? A
vegan pint. Yeah. Whatever that is. I'm
Whatever
sure
that is.
That'll be fine.
Well, thank you very much, Lee, and to viewers and listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, then please go onto our website tfa.net, and at the top of the screen you'll see a join button. A couple of simple moves, and you can become a member of the Freedom Association. And I sincerely hope that you will, to help support our work. Until the next time, goodbye.